Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mosaic Podcast. This podcast right today, I'm so excited about because these are crazy times we're living in, aren't they? It's like in the midst of what the heck happened to us? In the midst of a life that we were living where we were struggling or we were playing or we were doing whatever we did, never in our wildest imaginations did we ever imagine we would be here in this moment with something called the coronavirus. And the global reach of this virus has become so large that people are isolating and getting space and closing down work and closing down schools, and all that stuff is happening. And today I have somebody with me who has become a friend of mine. I don't see him. I've never met him face to face, but I was on his podcast. We've had conversations. He has a heart that is a heart of gold. He's a gentle man in every respect, and he pushes the limits for people in the work that he does of bringing them from the life that they're living to the next level life that they can have. And so we could have no better guest right now on the podcast amidst all this chaos and confusion that are going on than Nathan Seaward, who, well, let me tell you a little bit about him, and then we'll get into the conversation. He was born into a pretty ordinary life in New Zealand. Nathan lived in a suburban neighborhood, which was a 15-minute bike ride to the airport. And he would just lay in the long grass and watch the planes fly a few hundred feet above him. Well, surprise, surprise. Nathan became a pilot and enjoyed a successful 16-year career flying planes until his desire for personal development led him to become a personal coach and host and creator of the popular podcast, The Nathan Seaward Show. He believes through the process of self-discovery and self-mastery, entrepreneurs can change the world while creating extraordinary lives for themselves and their families. He became fascinated with minimalism, and today I hope we'll talk a little bit about reducing all of that excess stuff in your life so that you can focus on what you truly love, which is really what coronavirus is sort of the underlying message of that. He's traveled to over 25 countries, and he coaches a group of highly motivated, ambitious people who want to take their life to the next level. To learn more about him, and all of this will be in the show notes, but just go to www.nathanseaward.com. I think you'll like what you see there. I've enjoyed meeting this man, and I hope one day to stand face to face with him, to sit, have a coffee, a scotch, a cigar, whatever we do together. And right now, I enjoy having the introduction to him to you. Welcome to the Mosaic Podcast, Nathan.
Danny, thank you for having me. That's a beautiful introduction.
Well, it's my honor. It's the story of your life, my friend.
Thank you.
When you sit back and reflect, I always like to go into this because it doesn't necessarily mean that much until we sit for a minute and think about it. What did your parents do when you were growing up?
Great question. My mother was a high school teacher at an all-girls school, and she taught PE, or gym class, I think you call it over here.
Yeah.
And she was incredibly inspiring in that way. She joined this tiny little school in the 80s, and it was a small Catholic girls' school. She raised money to build a huge new gymnasium at the school.
Wow.
She built the football team. She built the basketball team. In the Commonwealth, we play a game called netball. She built the netball teams. And she took this tiny little school. And when I was about 14, her school won the New Zealand National Secondary School Girls Soccer Tournament.
Wow.
One of the most incredible things.
So that's not really a PE teacher. Like when we think of a PE teacher here, we think of someone that just does exercises and gets people running and gets people playing sports. she really revolutionized her position at school and the school.
Yeah,
in
she
general.
was she was a real mentor and a real inspiration. And you run into ex students of hers all the time in all different ways. That some of them were pilots and flight attendants that I used to fly with, and you know, I never had a bad word to say against her, and always had a little story about something she'd said or the way she'd motivated them. She's an incredibly positive, kind-hearted, inspiring woman, and you know, she's my mother, but she's actually mother to thousands of people out there.
Wow. And how about your dad?
My dad, so he grew up in pretty rough circumstances, and lived in a state house. My grandparents lived in the same government paid for housing for 50 years in the exact same house. And he got himself a high school education, and then figured out by getting an apprenticeship with the mobile oil company in sales that he was a natural at selling and a natural at talking, and ended up traveling the country working for Mobil, selling things, and then got into the plastics packaging industry. Found a role at a great company, became the sales manager, and did that for 40 years, and loved every second of it. Just loved selling more than anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
So growing up, who did you look up to most? Your mom or your dad?
It's a good question. I think probably my mother. We're probably more similar in a lot of ways. My dad is old-fashioned in a lot of ways, so would work hard, would go to the pub, have a few drinks after work, would come home, and sort of leave dad alone type mentality was how we were raised. So I didn't have a lot of connection with my dad growing up. He was sort of the grumpy guy that worked hard, and so my mum and I were much closer. And then her experience was also, like I said, I would come home and she'd say, "Hey, I've got to go to basketball training. I've got to go to hockey training. I've got to go to, whatever she was coaching that evening." So they were both hardworking people, very hardworking people.
And did you have brothers and sisters, or did that leave you in an environment like here you have a dad, you don't disturb dad, and mom's gone coaching? What happened to Nathan?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic. So my father had a previous marriage. So he had 3 boys and a girl from that previous marriage. They were all, the youngest one is about 15 years older than me.
Wow.
And, that marriage fell apart, and he did not have a lot to do with them, when they were growing up. And then he married my mother and had me. And I think his mentality was like, wow, I've already got 4 kids.
Right.
I don't know if I can handle any more. But my mum obviously wanted a child, so she had me. So it was, very much, a crazy family dynamic where this, and just to add one more sort of complication to it, my mother is Canadian from Montreal, so I had this whole huge family in Canada. So I had all these dynamics, like older siblings, half siblings, some rich, some poor, working parents, kind of an only child, but not an only child. It's very interesting dynamics.
Wow. Sounds confusing.
Exactly. I'm confused by it. And I was there.
And so what impact did that have growing up? Because like, I know for me, I lost my parents when I was, my dad when I was 13 and my mom when I was 15. And as beautiful as my friends were, and as kind as they were, and as kind as the families of my friends were, and when I moved from one city to another to be with my aunt and uncle, and people just were just so gracious and nice to me, I just felt like nobody could really understand the life that I was going through because they hadn't lost their parents. And so how did that settle for you? I mean, how do you feel like did you feel people got you? Did you feel like you were a stranger in the strange land? Did you feel like, oh my God, like what the heck is going on here? How did you come in with all that?
Yeah. I think it changes, you probably have a different view of your childhood, now than you did even 10 years ago. And I think mine develops, and changes. And at the moment I'm quite at peace with the whole thing. But I think just objectively, quite lonely for me.
Yeah.
And I think because my parents worked so hard, I think the philosophy was, hey, keep quiet and entertain yourself.
Wow.
And if I look at my life, that's kind of what I've done. I'm very independent. I'm a solo operator. I don't have a partner. I travel the world. I have my own business. It's just me. And so I kind of just keep quiet and get on with it and look after myself, entertain myself. So yeah, I think that's one of it.
So I love where we're going, because I can just hear people thinking, boy, that sounds a lot like me. Not the players on the scorecard might be different. The events might be different. But I think there are a lot of people that grow up feeling pretty lonely, feeling like they're just in this by themselves without a rule book, not quite figuring it out. So when you say you work some of that through, but you grew up pretty lonely, what was the place for you where that sort of not only became okay, but you actually grew from that place, out of, not necessarily even out of the, are you still lonely now, is maybe the obvious question.
Probably, yeah. There's probably definitely moments of loneliness, where I feel lonely, or just don't know how to not be alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So not, just it's not it's not something that comes naturally to me. Look, I have 1,000 friends, and my family, we're all very close. So I'm not, I don't want to be dramatic. It's not a dramatic thing, but just, I think it's that experience of keeping people at arm's reach. Like I often have that, the image of just holding someone, at arm's length, but holding them tight so they can't get away, but they also can't come too close.
Right.
So
that.
I have a lot of people that are a meter away from me. Yeah, but in terms of working through it, I think, being the craving, I think when you feel lonely, or there's a couple of flavors for it. One is like misunderstood.
Yeah.
So not really, I felt like I was an only child and on my own. And so probably like you with your parents passing away, it's like I didn't really feel like anybody really got me. There was no one, there wasn't that close sibling to maybe relate to, or even a parent that was like super close, I think, that understood. And I started to struggle with my sexuality when I was around 12 or 13. So that kind of added, I think I already had that belief now that I'm on my own and I got to figure this out and nobody gets me or whatever. And then you add kind of sexuality into that kind of just adds fuel to the fire.
Yeah, especially around that age of, around the age where teenagers are discovering themselves, to have it not be like what everybody else is doing is also confusing.
Yeah, I went to an all-boys school that was very, very brutal about homosexuality. So that was quite challenging.
Wow.
But looking back now, like the work I've done to work through that is, one, just having some empathy and compassion for my experience. So, because again, you can look at it objectively. We were middle class, maybe even middle upper class. So I never wanted for anything. I went to a private school. We went skiing, we traveled, we went overseas. So I was not living in poverty and, and struggle. So I'm not comparing myself to that, but I also have to own my own experience and see how it shapes me. So that's the place I'm sharing with you from, is not to say that I had a horrible experience, but the growth for me has been learning to be who I needed for that child in me. Yeah. So when I needed guidance, when I needed love, when I needed support, learning to actually give that to myself has been the journey for me.
Talk a little bit, go down into that a little bit, because there's so many people that one, not only don't know how to do that, but don't even take the time to even think that they can do that.
Yeah.
And even in this world, which is as elevated as we are, we're sitting in this coronavirus time where people have to isolate, and people don't really know what to do. And the beauty is they're standing on their balconies singing to people in foreign countries, right?
Yeah.
And how fabulous the need for connection shows. But there's a certain sense of a need for connection within our own selves that most of us don't have any sense of. We're so occupied outside. We don't have any sense of it. So how did you discover that? How did you realize that little Nathan could talk to big Nathan, could talk to little Nathan, and could take care of little Nathan in the way he wasn't ever taken care of before?
Well, I did a lot of inner child work. I have amazing coaches that I've worked with over the last 5 or 6 years that have given me access to a lot of these tools. And inner child work is very powerful. It's when you there's different exercises, but when you picture the little boy or the little girl that you were, 5, 6, 7 years old, and in your mind you really have a conversation with that child.
Yeah.
And I said before, for me, it was learning to have empathy. It's hard to have empathy for, adult versions of us. We sort of, most of us struggle to have compassion and empathy for each other, but it comes pretty naturally to have empathy for a 5 or a 6 or a 7-year-old that's crying and scared and just wants a hug. And so forming that relationship. So again, and just to use myself as an example, anytime I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling fearful, which is often, I'm in business, so there's no shortage of fear and anxiety. I know that that's going to be my little boy feeling lost and lonely.
Yeah.
Because I just know that was my experience as a kid. When I was feeling scared, it was because I felt on my own. Nobody was helping me. Nobody gave me any advice. Nobody grabbed me by the hand and said, hey, you're a little boy. You don't need to worry about this. We've got you.
Yeah, I'll take care of you.
That's right. So now I notice when I'm anxious or when I'm scared, which a lot of people are feeling right now, I can look at my little boy and go, hey, I know that you're scared. I know that you're afraid. I know that you don't really know what's going to happen, but just know that I've got you. I'm not going anywhere. I'll hold you. I'll love you. I believe in you. I'm proud of you. We're in this together. I may not know all the answers, but there's a lot of smart people out there that I'm going to ask for help. They're going to help us. But you don't need to feel the burden of this. You're a little boy.
Yeah.
So just hold my hand. Is there anything you need? Do you need a hug? I'm here for whatever you need. And just, I would say even just people, I don't know if you feel it, but even just hearing me say that to you, I'm sure you could feel a sense of being held and being comforted.
Yeah. I was just going to say that I love what you're saying, because it's so, I think we live in a world where we think we have to fix people, where we think we have to know answers or find solutions for them, especially in the world of coaching. We sort of, even though we're told to ask questions, so often we give answers, and help people through. But there's so much comfort that I'm finding now just in holding the space for people to say what they've always wanted to say and just listening to them. Most of the time people don't want us to tell them what to do. I think they just want to be heard and acknowledged and listened to.
Yeah, I call it witnessing.
Witnessing. Fabulous. So if you could think back, well, maybe just ask this question first. Are there things that you have inside of you that you've always wanted to say, but you haven't ever been able to say still today?
Oh, undoubtedly. I live my life. My number one value is authenticity.
Yeah.
And I share vulnerably, I think, more than most people. In my writing or on my podcast or even just with friends. And so that is a real practice to me. If I feel like there's something that is not being said, I'll find a way to say it.
Yeah.
But in this moment, I think it's probably, when I wake up in the morning, I do feel a lot of fear or anxiety as an immediate reaction. And not about coronavirus, let's put that aside, but just there's an underlying disease that's there when I wake up. And if I don't, well, first of all, that frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Because I know, I know who I am deep down. You said at the start, like I'm just a big ball of love, that just wants to hold everyone and make a difference. And so to kind of wake up in the state of like fear or wanting to distract myself on my phone or just, you know, wound up, or I hate that. I hate that about
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
So I don't say that too often. And it's kind of 50-50 whether I can go through the paces to settle that down, to be
Yeah.
with that, and to give myself some love, or whether I just go, fuck it, I'm just off to work. And you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%.
Mm.
And again, I want to invite our listeners, because there's so much of a desire when someone is as open as Nathan is being right now, to just want to help him. And I want to just invite you now to just, even as you're listening to this, because time is a relative matter. And when you're listening to it, it's not the moment that this podcast is happening, but even in just listening to those words and just reaching out to him and understanding and acknowledging and validating and just being with him, it's all you have to do. You know, it's just, and just give him that validation. Tell him you've heard him. Tell him you understand. Tell him he's not asking you to agree with him. He's not asking you to fix him. You know, like, and just watch the tendency to want to go, oh, but have you done? And oh, but can I? Or oh, but, you know, and just let people be where they are. There's some real power when we just give people the space to say what they've never really been able to say to somebody before.
Is there anything you want to share?
Oh God, yeah, totally. Everything I want to share. I was about to go out May 1st on a year-long trip around America to listen to people, and it wasn't so I could heal people or fix people. It's because there's so many places that I have inside me that are buried from my pain of loss and anguish of being alone and feeling separate and not really feeling heard. Like, the fact that I want to go out and listen to the things that nobody wants to say or hasn't been able to say means that that's really what I want to do. I'm living the life that I'm looking for the answers. And I realized I want to be able to sit with people who hate, like the Ku Klux Klan, to give them the space to say what they want to say, not because I want to heal them or fix them, because I want to touch a place inside of me that has buried that hatred so far in myself that it just grows roots underneath me, you know, that judges people or wants to fix people or wants to change. I want to go and hear my voice through the voices of all the people that I'm going to speak to. And now the coronavirus has postponed that a little bit, but I'll still go. And I want to still do it virtually through conversations like this. Or I'm thinking now, you know, what can I do to give people something, to be there for people, to listen to people? And I've just decided today I'm going to set up a few hours each day or a few hours on certain days. And I'm just going to say, call me if you just need somebody you want to talk to. I don't want to fix you. I don't want to change you. I just want to hold the space for you to be able to say what you need to say, and for me to just love you and to know that you're loved no matter what you feel. I need to learn. I'm scared to death to love again, because like you said, you hold people, you know, here. I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because what I realized for myself is my definition of love is a mom and dad that passed away. They're not a mom and dad that are present. So when I have love in front of me, I believe that if I let somebody in, they're going to get hurt, or if they come in, that's not my definition of love. My definition of love is that they're not there. And so it's so interesting to see the stories that I tell myself around what love is based on my experience growing up of that type of love. Does that make any sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
And so rewriting the story of my own life, accepting all of the chapters that are there, but rewriting this chapter today to love and acknowledge and accept and be there for the person that went through that, but that says today, hey, you know something? Love for me today is not that. Love for me is to be able to sit with a brother that I only met virtually over a few calls and a few conversations, and just saying, brother, I love you. And there's nothing you could do that would make me not love you.
Mm.
That place is so real for me. And yet there's still this little veil that's from my past that says, really, that's not really real. I mean, you're going to say to this guy, you know, you love him. I mean, come on, like, you know, right?
Mm.
So part of the reason why I love doing the show is to just get to those inflection points where we collide with ourselves, and the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we're creating no longer resonate. And where do we go from that point? So in all the work you've done with people, and you've done a lot, you've got really successful, good people that you're working with. What surprised you the most?
How similar we all are.
How so?
The flavors are different, you know, but we're all ice cream. I just made that up.
Is that
Yeah,
because we're taking a good licking, or what is that?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we're all cold and hard. No, because we all want the same thing. You know, we want different flavors of it, but at our core, we all want to love and be loved. We all want to do meaningful work and feel like we're making a difference and that our life means something while we're here. And those things are common. I've spent time, I spent 2 weeks with a group of therapists and coaches in Liberia, one of the poorest countries in Africa, and went through a civil war and has one psychiatrist for the whole country.
Wow.
We went through the country for a couple of weeks and just worked with nonprofits and went to different villages and just spoke to people and, you know, did what we could to provide some healing in different ways. And guess what? They want the same thing as you. You know,
Yeah.
whether in a poor village in Liberia, they just want to love and be loved and, you know, provide meaning.
So what stops that from happening? I mean, you don't need a college degree to love and accept somebody. You don't need to be part of a religious organization to do that. What stops people, in your experience, from just loving and accepting each other? It's what we all want. It's what we ourselves want. It's what
Mm.
they want. It's the easiest thing in the whole world to do. Why can't we just do it?
Well, first we have to love and accept ourselves, and that's more of a challenge.
Okay, but why? Why is even that more? I mean, I know the byline. I know the subset of that, of how easily acceptable that is. But why is that so
It's
hard
hard.
to do?
Well, it's a phrase that I like to use is it's very hard to read the label from inside the jar.
Hmm.
And so it's very hard to see any of this stuff. You know, someone I was talking to recently, you know, had really shut their heart off. And that's very common in our world for different reasons, whether you had an alcoholic father or an angry father or just someone that was kind of loud and scary or even just not there. That's more the rule than the exception. So that caused a lot of little kids to close their heart, you know,
Yeah.
and to protect themselves because that's very scary and very hard to be around. And that's 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 a lot of the times where it starts. We have a society of closed-hearted people because of that's how we were raised. And so if you try to share with someone about loving other people or learning to love yourselves, you're talking about a foreign concept to them. It's not something that they can grapple onto. They can maybe get the idea in their mind of, oh yeah, like loving people, but it's not a felt experience. It's not a felt experience because a lot of us closed our hearts off at a young age. I imagine when your parents passed away, it was hard to keep your heart open and keep loving and thinking the world was happening for your, you know, your greatest good. So I think it's challenging because we can't see ourselves. We can't see what we're experiencing. We're trying to think about a concept that we kind of only really a lot of times can think about until we have our own experience of it. So you're having to point people in a direction and then giving them the tools to find it for themselves, which is tough.
Yeah. So this is so interesting for me, because you and I, the work that we do is so similar. And so it's rare for me to be able to ask the questions that I ask or want to ask to someone else who is like me and sees who sees the world in a similar way. So I appreciate it. And one of the things the Mosaic, the book I wrote, talks about is the fact that nothing is as it seems. Like the world we see it, it's just the world we see. It isn't the world that is. And I know the history that I have. I know when my mom and dad passed away, I blocked out major portions of my life from the time I was 0 to 15 because it was too painful for me to look at. And so I have a few memories, but the majority of memories, I don't even know what happened. Right? So I know that we do that, and yet I'm almost 65 years old. Like 15 to 65 is 50 years. That's a long time to be letting 15 years affect 65 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't get why we do that. Like, I'm not the 15-year-old kid that I was. And the whole way that I look at my life in general is not the way that I looked at my life as a 15-year-old kid. And so what prevents us, in your mind, from taking the wisdom of ourselves now? Time is just like we can go and talk to the little boy that's in us. We can go from the wisdom that's in us and talk to the little boy that's in us, and we can. What I love about coronavirus, just to keep coming back to it, is it happens so quick.
Not a phrase you hear every day.
Yeah, but what I love about it is that it happened so quick and it came out of nowhere. Well, the force for love and the force for goodness and the force of godliness and righteousness and wisdom is that same force that can come that quickly too. And so what is it that it allows us to believe that the fear of coronavirus can grow that quickly and can make us shut down our lives, really put our lives at a standstill? But we don't believe that the positive nature of that, the love and the joy, the wisdom that we have now, can come back and infest the rest of our life. And that's the place that I'm working on right now. Of how do I let go of all the baggage that I've been carrying and just receive what's coming now? Because all the stories make great stories. They'll still be my stories, but they don't have to be my story today. And that's really the work that I'm doing with myself. And because I'm doing it with myself, guess what? That's the work people want to do with me, right? Isn't that amazing, right? But that's the discovery of saying, why do we have to be what we were when we can be what we are? And I know, that put the imprint. I know that did that. But I'm finding the more that I let go of it, the more I'm having memories of things that happened to me as a kid also. 50 years later.
Is it like you took off some of the painful stuff, and then you could see some of the other memories come through?
I wish I could say that I did a lot of work in removing the pain. All I did, I think it's so simple now. I think it's just, all we have to do is just like let go of all that's filling us. Like just let it go, swipe right, and just see what's behind us. There's something, everything. Here's what I really believe, and I'm doing some work with a woman, her name is Sarah McCrum, who does this around finances. She has a book called Love Money, Money Loves You, and she has a program that she's doing, which I'm a part of, and I'm helping her, and she's helping me. But there's something miraculous about this idea of just what happens when you just let go of everything that you're holding on to, of everything that fills you, so that you can actually make some space for something new to come in, and you receive this new energy, And it's not hard. It's not like it's a lot of work. It's just none of the stuff is there anymore. And this new energy comes in and it literally transforms us into a new person. And it doesn't take a lot of struggle. It doesn't take a lot of work. It doesn't take a lot of, it's just, and people say, I don't know how to let go, but I tell them to hold the pencil and open up their hand and let go. And they know how to let go. We don't want to let go. Maybe.
Yeah, I had this moment last year where, nothing, it felt like nothing was going right for me. Nothing was happening.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make things happen. My flying career was very successful because in part I made it happen. Like I worked my butt off. I was obsessed about it. It's all I ever thought about. It consumed me. I reached out to people. I networked. I explored. I made it happen. And in the personal development business, that's not such a great strategy all the time because we need to come from something a little bit deeper a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And last year I felt like, I'd been traveling the world for a couple of years, fully nomadic, and then had decided to settle down and chosen New York. And I'd spent, 5 months living in New York and then thought, okay, this is neat. I'd like to stay here, but couldn't find a way to stay here. And then my lease was expiring on my apartment and I didn't have enough money. And then clients were like leaving me just hand over fist. It was the most bizarre thing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't enroll any new clients in the business, and it just nothing was working, and I was running quickly out of energy and money, but mostly energy. And one thing I'm grateful to myself for during that time is I meditated more than ever. I spent a lot of time, an hour every morning in meditation. And there was one morning where I was sitting there and I just, I do a little prayer to the universe every day. It's kind of different every day, but, basically asking to use me as a channel so that I can serve people from, my highest good. And I was sitting there in the meditation and I just, I said to the universe, I'm done. I don't know what the F you want from me.
Right.
I have tried everything. I'm trying to do everything. I'm trying to come from the right place. There's nothing I haven't tried. I'm done. I give up. I don't know what you want from me. I don't know. You're not using me. I'm not serving anyone. People are in fact leaving me. I'm done. I quit. I'm out. And in that moment, only in that moment, I realized how tightly I had been holding on.
Wow. Yeah.
My whole life, not just for that year, my whole life.
Wow.
I had a death-like grip on life.
Wow.
To go the way I needed it to go.
Yeah.
And that was the first moment that I actually truly, you can call it surrender, which sounds very fun and pretty.
Yeah.
But I gave up.
Yeah.
And from that moment, everything started to change.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like I'm writing a cheesy story, but literally everything changed from that moment. The universe kind of went, thank you for giving up. Now I can take over.
Yeah. I had a similar experience. I think we spoke about this, in your kind sessions with me, of just this thought of, I've told people over and over and over again that God will take care of them, but I wasn't living like God would take care of me. I was hustling to take care of myself. And I had to get to that place where I was broke, where nothing was working, where I really said I'm over too. And so that place is a painful place.
Incredibly painful. That's what we're avoiding.
And so what gave, for the people that are listening that say, God, I know exactly that situation, but I don't know that I have the courage to go to that place where it's that empty, where I can just say, I give up, because if I give up, like, it's not working for me now, but if I give up, how will it ever work? We've been told we can't just give up.
Well,
what would you say to them?
Well, I wouldn't say anything. I would say, I would share my story.
Yeah.
And what happened with me is, the big weight, the noose around my neck is I had 3 properties that I'd purchased, when I was a pilot and earning a lot of money. And so I had a lot of mortgages plus rent in New York. So I had 4 big checks to pay every month. And that was what was really the noose around my neck. And I thought, man, if I don't pay those, it made me think during that time. I was like, wow, I put the bank ahead of myself all the time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
go, let's look after the bank first, and then I'll take care of myself at some point down the list. And do you know what happened? Like that moment I gave up, I couldn't pay my rent on any of the properties. I couldn't pay my rent in my apartment or any of my mortgages. And the bank said, within a couple of weeks, they said, hey, you haven't made a payment. I said, yeah, you're right. I can't make the payment. And they said, oh, okay, well, let's figure something out. Let us know when you can pay. We're here to help. And I was like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
I didn't expect that, right?
Yeah, well, it just wasn't, and hey, they're not going to do that forever. But it
Right.
wasn't as bad as my fear was convincing me. It was ruining my whole life, the fear of that moment.
Yeah.
And when I actually went through it, I was like, okay, this is not so bad. Unbelievably, a guy phoned me out of the blue and said, hey, I know you've got an apartment in this place. Have you ever thought about selling it? I really want to get an apartment in this place. And I remember you had one. And I said, this is like a miracle. Like, you have no idea. And it's an apartment that they were not selling.
Right.
If I put it on the market, it would sell in a year if I was lucky.
Wow.
And this guy paid cash. And so, that was the start of things really turning around.
Yeah.
But it came from me giving up.
Yeah, I so want to underscore that and underline that and put it in bold and put parentheses around it and put it in quotes and do all the things that we have to do to have that jump off the page, because I can tell you my own experience as well. As soon as I realized that what I was doing wasn't giving me the happiness that I wanted, and I was just running on that proverbial wheel of just thinking if I keep myself busy, something good will happen. It's exactly the opposite. If I just relax and let go and just trust and know, things that I never even dreamed possible come to me because there's finally room in my cup. It's like the story of the guy who comes to learn Zen. I've told you that story, right? The guy who comes to learn Zen to the master, and the master pours tea in his cup. And there's no room in the cup, and he keeps pouring. It goes on the floor, and the student says, sir, can't you see there's no more room in the cup? You're pouring and it's going on the floor. And he says, well, that's what you've come wanting me to do for you. You're filled to the brim. There's nothing for me to put in. Go home and empty yourself a little bit. And then I can put something in. And that,
beautiful. I love it.
It's such a beautifully simple story. And I keep thinking, what if we have it all wrong? Not right or wrong, but what if it's not a matter of working harder, but working less hard? What if it's just like receiving, allowing ourselves to receive and get all this goodness? What would that bring us? I know for me in my life, it's bringing me unheard of pleasures, unheard of finances, unheard of friendships. I mean, beautiful things are coming just from the fact of just letting there have to be some room in there.
Yeah, and another thing that someone shared with me is that getting and receiving are two different frequencies.
Yeah.
And so I lived in the frequency of getting, and the frequency of actually sitting back and receiving. Like, we're so focused on getting, we can't see all the things that are trying to come in, or we're not open to receiving all of the things that are trying to come in. I felt like in the situation I was describing was like I was living in an old shack, that was falling apart. And I was saying, man, I sure wish I had a mansion on this property.
Yeah.
But every time the shack started falling apart, I kept like banging an extra piece of wood on it to hold it together, going, why is the shack falling apart?
Yeah.
And then a hurricane would come by and try and pull it down. I would go, damn, I got to save the shack. Not realizing that, hey, if you want to build a mansion, you got to pull the shack down. You got to let that shack fall to pieces. And that's not going to feel fun, especially if you were attached to the shack sentimentally. That's not going to feel great as that thing falls to pieces.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if you want to put a mansion on it, that's going to have to disappear.
Yeah. 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 I love that. One of the places that I really like around the conversation that we're having is the sense of letting go. And the you you have lived some of your life as a minimalist, of letting go of things that you thought were really important so that you could have just the things that you loved. And I wonder if we're all not in that process of not only letting go of physical things, but letting go of the mental stories and letting go of the the shacks that keep us from having the mansions or the palaces or the abundance that we want. Um, can you talk about that minimalist lifestyle a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I got rid of my car in 2011. I remember that was the start of it. And, I read a book by The Minimalist. They have a documentary on
Yep,
Netflix. They're very
great
popular now.
show.
But yeah, and, 10 years ago, nobody had heard of them, but they were putting out little ebooks about minimalism. And I read them, and I knew a couple of people in that community. And I loved the philosophy. And the most important distinction is getting rid of your things is only a tiny part of minimalism. That's the headline, but it's not that interesting. It's really about realizing that how can we remove all of the things that are unimportant so we have room for the things that are important, the
Yeah,
overflowing cup again. And there was a great exercise that I did around this, and it's going to sound a little clinical, but it was actually very eye-opening. uh, I wrote down all the people that I interact with in my life. This is an exercise that came from the Minimalist book. And, you sort of start with your parents at the top, then your family, and then, close friends, and just everybody that you interact with. And for me, it was a lot of people day to day. And then you put them into three categories, kind of, family, friend, or acquaintance, something like that. And then you rated how much time you spent in a week with each of those people.
well,
And for me, it was like the people that I said were important to me, I spent like 7% of my week with.
wow,
And the acquaintances that I said were not that important to me, I was going for coffee with, I was having calls with, I was making time for. And so I was spending like 90% of my time with people that I said were actually not, in the big scheme,
right,
not that important.
wow,
And so that made me think, gosh, this is completely out of whack. I need to invest more time in my parents and in these, a handful of people that I say are the ones that are most important to me.
yeah,
And that was huge. That's a great example of minimalism, where instead of trying to be friends with 10,000 people,
yeah.
find the people that are most important to you and invest in them and create space that you're giving them the attention that you say they are worth to you.
Love that. And I would even encourage people to do that with thought processes that they have in their head. What thoughts are you spending a lot of time with? And are they valuable thoughts to you? And if they're not, how do you let them go? This whole flavor of this whole podcast that we're having today is this idea of what really happens when we let go and just receive something new. And that can be the letting go of the need to fix somebody or help somebody when they come to you and you hold the space to them for them to be vulnerable and open. Like, how good does that feel, just to say, come here and let me just hold you and love you, and we don't have to fix anything or know the answers. Watch, become aware. For those of you who are listening, for me, I know I'm going to walk away totally different from this conversation. I want to become so much more aware of what am I holding on to and that really doesn't need to be with me anymore. I can put it on a shelf somewhere and I can easily pick it up when I need it, if I ever need it. Who's playing on your basketball team that's been playing so hard and so long they're exhausted, and you can rest them for a little while and let new people play? Because you got 10 players and only 5 positions, right? So, like,
Mm.
you can substitute out some things. So, I want to be sensitive to your time because I love you, brother, and we could have conversations like this
Yeah,
forever.
it's very energy giving, these
Yes,
conversations.
yeah, and again, I would like to invite our listeners to have energy giving conversations, not energy taking conversations. and what does that mean? And that doesn't mean you can't receive, but there's a difference between taking energy and receiving energy and giving energy and needing energy. It's they're so different. They're like right next to each other, but they're so important, the distinctions. When you look at, I close the podcast with this question all the time. When you look at the world around you, and I know you don't have children, but imagine for future generations. Is this the world that we're living in today that you always dreamed of handing over to your children's children and future generations? Is this the world that you always said, wow, this is what I want to give to the future?
It's a little bit of a loaded question, because I think is I believe it's perfect. I know that's a cliche, but I do believe that everything is perfect, because for all the challenges that we face, equally we have people that rise to those occasions.
Yeah.
I went through, just as a quick aside, a 7.1 earthquake in my hometown in Christchurch in New Zealand in 2011. Wow. That decimated the downtown of the city. And I lived downtown in an apartment. I was home at the time. And, that was really tough. My city hasn't really recovered from it. Wow. It's still struggling to recover. And there was all the, it was the same feeling I'm seeing out there with coronavirus. It kind of feels like society is collapsing, or at least shutting down. Yeah, for the most part. And it felt like that too. There was a feeling I had of, wow, how fragile society is really when you get down to it. I had no gas in my car, and all the gas stations had their lines ruptured. So within half a day, I didn't have a car. There was no electricity, and I hadn't charged my iPhone. So within about 2 hours, my iPhone was useless. I didn't, all the food that was in my pantry had come out and crashed onto the tile floor and was ruined. So I went to go and get more food, and of course all the supermarkets are shut. Everybody was at home dealing with their houses and families and everything. So pretty quickly you go, wow, this thing is sort of pretty fragile, more fragile than I'd ever imagined. And I'm not saying that to be alarmist or cause my anxiety, but it kind of just allowed me to see that exactly what you said. A lot of this is an illusion. A lot of it, what we see, is not actually reality. Yeah. But the more important point out of what I learned from that is there were so many incredible things that came out of it. One of my good friends launched a thing called the Student Volunteer Army, and he enrolled all the students in the city to form an army to go around and help people. And it was really basic. A Facebook message here, hey, I've got a whole load of an elderly person in Avondale has all of his furniture fallen over. Who can go and help him? Yep, within an hour, 4 students there helping to tidy up. And the community got brought so close together. Yeah. So close together. And so, whilst the world on the surface looks pretty fractured and, tumultuous right now, I think out of the ashes is going to come more love, more community, new ways of doing things, the collapsing of old structures that at one time may have served us but no longer do. Yeah. And, so I'm not sure how to answer your original question. Yeah, no, you're doing great. I love it. But to say, yeah, I'm excited to pass on this world as it renews and expands and opens into something new. So what I really hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the world in its current state of affairs isn't one you necessarily want to hand over to the people, but the potential for what will come from what will grow like a phoenix out of this is a world that has just tremendous hope to it. Is that what you're sort of saying, or is it? Well, you're still saying that, this is not the world I want to hand over. I don't necessarily feel that you live in this world and I love you. I live in this world. I
Yes.
have thousands of people in my life that I adore that live in this world that I love. Would I want them to be different? No. I think there's tremendous parts of this world. And for whatever reason, what looks uncomfortable now, which is part of this world, may have to happen that way in order to birth something more beautiful.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say that this is right or wrong or this needs to be changed, or I wouldn't go that far, but to say that it's perfect.
So what I'm hearing is there's a perspective of being able to see what you love in a world that has some things that you love and don't love. But by focusing on those things that you see that you love and seeing how much goodness is in that, it makes this world be something that you love just the way it is. Is that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what's one thing you could help people to do to change that perspective? Because really, like, the world we see is the world we create.
Mm-hmm.
And just that beautiful thought of you saying, because I feel the same way, I love you and I don't want you to be any different. I just love the opportunity to have these conversations with you when we can. It's just a perspective, right? That says it's not only what we're seeing on the news, it's this world. That's why I wanted to go on the trip, to go around the world,
Mm-hmm.
and speak with people, because I think there's such inherent goodness in the world that we don't see because the media makes more money on selling conflict,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the hero's journey. There's got to be the conflict in the journey for the book to be interesting, right?
Yeah.
So what would be one thing that you might be able to invite people to look at to change perspective?
Well, I think it's particularly now, like if you're in the coronavirus thing, there's a lot of people sitting around watching online content. So there's probably more people watching our interview than normally would be, I would suspect. And one of the first things is to breathe and literally stop and breathe. When we're anxious, we don't even want to do that. We don't even want to stop. We kind of are wound up in this anxiety. So I would say stop and breathe. And a good way to do it is take 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, and then release for 6 seconds. And if you do 10 rounds of that, first of all, you'll feel different.
Yeah.
The second thing is, if you can take a break from the news for a little bit. And I did this morning where I just went through and just what we did, I was thinking about all the things that I'm grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
And none of those things have anything to do with coronavirus. You know,
Yeah.
this home that I get to live in, my health that I have now, I don't take for granted. The life I've lived, the people that are in my life, the people that have shaped me, my loving family, none of those things change
Yeah.
with coronavirus.
Love it.
And so coming back and just realizing that actually right now, everything is okay. In this moment, everything is okay.
Yeah.
Are things going to get tough for a lot of people economically or whatever? Probably. And when they do, just do what I did with the bank, with the mortgage. Have the
Yeah.
conversation, deal with it, work through that, and then look at the next problem, one thing at a time.
Love it. You have something called impact.work, URL that people could go to. Tell me a little bit about that, because I think
Yeah,
that will give
well,
comfort in this time to people.
we didn't really talk about it much, but I transitioned from an airline pilot to become a life coach. Not a very common career path, but it came out of me feeling like there was something more. I had this career that I told you I loved since I was a little boy, and was starting to feel unfulfilled. Is this all there is? Feeling a little bit empty, not feeling like I was contributing as much as I wanted to, being creative as much as I wanted to. So I got into this business and, did a lot of other things that really helped me find a deeper fulfillment and a deeper love for my life. And so that's how I try to help people now. I start by having the conversation of how are you feeling, you know, what's going on for you, where are you feeling empty, where are you feeling unfulfilled, and the URLimpact.work is it's a 17-minute training that I put together that just helps take people through that process on that video of just slowing down and asking you some questions that will help you look at your life and how you can move forward. This coronavirus thing, I think, is going to cause a lot of people to reshape
Totally.
how they work. And so if you want some help with that, I'd love to give that for free.
Yeah, and if you're looking for tools, I can't recommend it highly enough. Also, you have www.nathanseaward.com, and I'm also that people can go to learn more about you. And I'm also going to post the URL for your Apple podcast,
Great.
the Nathan Seaward Show, so that people can have
Thanks,
that in
Danny.
the show notes. Absolutely. I want to just take a moment and just summarize for people if I can.
Sure.
There's something so inherently beautiful, and I hope you felt it in our conversation today, when Nathan and I are virtual strangers. We've never physically met. We've had a couple conversations. He was kind enough to offer me his services and to do so a little bit of work with me, which I highly recommend you do if you feel drawn to him to do. But there's something inherently beautiful when the mask of who we are comes off, and we just hold the space for each other to be who we are. To say that thing to someone that we've always wanted to say but never felt we could. And to just hold that space for people to say what they truly want to say. So much of our conversations with people in the world are about who we want people to believe we are, rather than actually who we are. And when we get away from that place of not really worrying what people think we are, but just being so real and vulnerable and just showing up as who we are, letting go of all that stuff that keeps that interaction from being real, sometimes miraculous things happen. It's what Nathan was talking about when he was feeling bad and at the bottom of the barrel and things came to him. It's what I was talking about in the same exact situation where I just didn't have any answers, and I just said, I don't have any answers, I give up, and answers that I could never even imagine came to me. There's something so inherently different to the successability of a life that we think we have to work so hard to achieve, that when we give up that, when we just let go of that and just allow this beautiful, benevolent, kind universe to give us what it wants to give us, it's worth the experiment. And I hope from this conversation with Nathan and I together that you'll venture out of your safe zone. You'll let go of some of the things you hold on to. You'll become a little bit more of a minimalist in the way you live your life, so that you can give away the things that have no value to you and understand what has true value to you, and let that start to reign in your life and give yourself a life that is of supreme value. Nathan, for taking the time to share yourself so honestly and so vulnerably and so kindly with me and the listeners of the Mosaic Podcast, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to everyone that took the time to listen. It's a very intimate experience, so thanks for joining us.
Yes, and I hope for you listeners that you will run, not walk, to the links below that I have in the show notes to learn more about Nathan, to invite him into your life, to just be with you and see if by the process of being together with him, you don't see something in yourself that you might never have seen before. We think we can do it alone, but we were never intended to do it alone. We were intended to have friends and people there to just walk the path with us and see what we can't see. And Nathan's someone I would really recommend you allow to walk with you. So for all of you who are listening, if you like the show, again, please give a good review on Apple Podcasts, and go see Nathan's sites. Go take his free thing, impact.work. Go to nathanseaward.com, and I look forward to seeing you next podcast. Until then, big love. Thank you all.